The courthouse fell silent as three officers slammed 78-year-old Joseph Washington to the marble floor. Nobody intervened. Nobody knew the silent old man with weathered hands was Agent 5591, a Cold War ghost whose dossier had been purged decades ago. His calm smile meant one thing: retribution was coming. Where are you watching this incredible story from? Before we continue this shocking tale of justice, hit that like button and subscribe to see what happens when an underestimated elderly man turns the tables on a corrupt system. The moment those officers put hands on Joseph Washington, they had no idea they were triggering events that would expose decades of injustice. Are you ready to witness what happens when the hunter becomes the hunted? Joseph Washington, a distinguished 78-year-old former history professor, arrives at the Richmond County Courthouse on a crisp autumn morning, his weathered hands gripping a worn leather briefcase containing decades of wisdom and secrets. He moves with deliberate steps toward courtroom 307, where his grandson Marcus faces trial on drug possession charges after being pulled over in Oak Ridge Heights, an affluent neighborhood where black faces are treated as automatic suspicious. The arresting officers, led by Sergeant Bradley Miller, a stocky man with cold blue eyes and 20 years on the force, have established a troubling pattern of targeting black citizens. Though official records show all complaints against them dismissed as unsubstantiated. Joseph settles into the hard wooden bench in the back row, his expression betraying nothing as he watches the proceedings unfold with the patient observation of a man who has witnessed history's darkest chapters firsthand. The courtroom carries the weight of inequality in every interaction. From the all-white jury selected after black candidates were systematically eliminated through peremptory challenges to the weary resignation on the face of Marcus's overworked public defender, Lisa Chen, whose desk groans under the weight of 47 active cases. During a brief recess, as jurors file out for their mid-morning break, Joseph rises slowly, his knees protesting years of service, and approaches the prosecution table where evidence photos lay scattered across the polished oak surface. His eyes scan the images methodically, noting inconsistencies in the vehicle search documentation that the defense has overlooked. His movement catches the attention of Sergeant Miller, who sits at the prosecution table alongside Officers James Taylor and Derek Reynolds, all three watching Joseph with immediate suspicion. "What do you think you're doing?" Miller demands, his chair scraping loudly as he stands, drawing attention from the court clerk and bailiff. Joseph holds up his visitor badge, his voice steady and dignified as he responds, "Just looking, sir. These are displayed in open court." Miller's face flushes with anger at the calm response, a vein pulsing visibly at his temple as he signals to Officers Taylor and Reynolds, who immediately flank Joseph like predators cornering prey. "He's tampering with evidence," Miller announces loudly, though Joseph's hands remain clasped behind his back, touching nothing. Lisa Chen rises from the defense table, objecting, "Your Honor, my client's grandfather is simply observing. There's no tampering occurring." Her protest dies in the stale courtroom air as Judge Hamilton Crawford, a 65-year-old fixture of Richmond County's judicial system, merely watches with detached interest, making no move to intervene as the officers seize Joseph's arms. "Step back from the evidence or you're under arrest." Officer Taylor warns, his grip tightening unnecessarily around Joseph's thin bicep. Joseph complies immediately, stepping backward with dignity intact. Yet, Officer Reynolds roughly spins him around, slamming him face first into the wooden railing separating the gallery from the court floor. The sudden violence draws gasps from spectators as Joseph's glasses clatter to the floor, skidding beneath the prosecution table. "Stop! He's complying!" Lisa shouts, her voice cracking with outrage as she rushes forward only to be blocked by the bailiff. The officers wrench Joseph's arms behind his back, the metal handcuffs biting into his delicate skin as they secure them with punitive tightness. Joseph makes no sound, no protest, no cry of pain, his silence more powerful than any objection as his face is pressed against the cold wood. Judge Crawford finally speaks, his voice carrying neither urgency nor concern. "Remove him to the holding area and charge him appropriately. We'll continue with the trial." The predominantly white courtroom remains unnervingly silent as Joseph is dragged toward the exit, his feet barely touching the ground between the two officers. Only Lisa continues objecting, demanding to accompany him as counsel, but she's ordered to remain for her primary client. As Joseph is escorted through the heavy wooden doors, his eyes meet Marcus's across the courtroom, a look passing between them that carries both reassurance and determination. At the Richmond County precinct, 6 blocks away, Joseph is processed by Deputy Pete Simmons, a heavy-set man with nicotine-stained fingers who takes sadistic pleasure in pressing Joseph's fingers forcefully into the ink pad for fingerprinting. "Got yourself in trouble, old-timer, should have stayed in your lane," Simmons taunts, deliberately smudging the prints to necessitate repeating the process. Through it all, Joseph remains silent, his posture straight, despite his age, his eyes measuring the room, the exits, the camera positions with the practiced assessment of someone who has navigated hostile territory before. When the processing concludes, Joseph finally speaks, "I'd like my phone call now." Simmons snorts derisively, but pushes the precinct phone across the desk. "Make it quick. Got a nice holding cell waiting for you alongside some folks who don't take kindly to troublemakers." Joseph picks up the receiver with steady hands, dialing a number from memory, not his family, not a lawyer, and speaks just 10 precise words into the mouthpiece. "Blackbird fallen at Richmond County. Authentication code Sierra, Echo 5591. Without waiting for a response, he hangs up, folding his hands patiently before him. Simmons, oblivious to the significance of the message, roughly grabs Joseph's arm, leading him to a crowded holding cell where he's the only black face among the detainees. As the cell door clangs shut, Joseph settles onto the metal bench, his face revealing nothing of the storm about to break over Richmond County. Across town, at the Richmond FBI field office, Special Agent Director Catherine Reynolds is reviewing case files when her secure line illuminates with an urgent flash priority notification. Her hand freezes mid-signature as the message appears on her screen. Authentication code Sierra Echo 5591 activated. Location Richmond County Precinct. Timestamp 11:42 a.m. Catherine's 15 years with the Bureau have trained her to maintain composure, but this code, one not used in 30 years, sends an electric current of recognition down her spine. She immediately locks her computer and strides purposefully to the secure communications room, her tailored suit jacket fluttering behind her like a battle flag. "Get me retired Assistant Director Thomas Clark on a secure line immediately," she instructs the communications officer, who responds to the authority in her voice without question. While waiting for the connection, Catherine enters her biometric credentials to access the sealed archives, searching for file SE5591. The system returns an unusual response. "File purged by executive order. Authorization level midnight blue. Contact emergency protocol officer." 12 minutes later, Thomas Clark's weathered face appears on the secure video conference screen, his retirement in Maine evidenced by the fishing trophies visible on the wall behind him. "Catherine?" He acknowledges tension evident in the deep lines of his face. "You wouldn't be calling this number unless—" "Sierra Echo 5591. Catherine interrupts, watching Clark's expression transform from casual retirement to full operational alertness. "The authentication code was just activated in Richmond. I need confirmation." Clark vanishes from screen, momentarily returning with an old leather journal secured by a combination lock. His fingers work the mechanism with practiced precision before he begins flipping through yellowed pages. "Sierra Echo 5591 belongs to Joseph Washington, code name Curator." Clark confirms, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "Catherine, if he's activated this code, it's critically serious. Washington was one of our most valuable assets during the Cold War. Intelligence gathering in Moscow, East Berlin, Johannesburg. His cover as an academic was impenetrable." Catherine absorbs this information with growing concern, scribbling notes as Clark continues. "His existence was scrubbed from all official records upon retirement in 1991. Protection protocol. The man has enemies in every intelligence agency from the Urals to the Andes. What's his situation? detained at Richmond County precinct. Catherine replies, already calculating response scenarios. No details yet on why. Clark's fist comes down hard on his desk, rattling the screen. That's unacceptable. Washington saved more American lives than anyone will ever know. He exposed 3 deep-cover Soviet operatives in our diplomatic corps. During the Angola crisis, his intelligence prevented a nuclear escalation. You need to extract him immediately. Catherine is already texting commands to her assistant while speaking. Assembling a team now. Any operational details I should know? Clark leans toward the camera, his voice lowering further. Washington's specialty was becoming invisible. A professor interested in obscure historical archives, nothing memorable, nothing threatening. But beneath that cover, the man possesses skills that would frighten our tactical teams. Close-quarters combat, phenomenal memory, multiple languages, and psychological warfare techniques that were decades ahead of their time. If he's maintained even half his capabilities. He trails off, leaving the implication hanging. One more thing, Catherine. Washington never ever breaks cover without cause. If he's identified himself using this code, something significant is happening in Richmond. Catherine thanks Clark and ends the transmission immediately, summoning her top agents to the conference room. Within minutes, she's briefing Tactical Specialist Agent Marcus Coleman, a former Army Ranger whose dark skin and imposing physique mask a brilliant strategic mind, and Senior Agent Danielle Chen, whose expertise in civil rights violations and public corruption has earned her national recognition. This is classified Level 4. Catherine begins distributing tablet computers with the limited information available. We have a high-value former intelligence asset detained at Richmond County Precinct. Extraction is Priority Alpha. This operation has been classified as a matter of national security. Agent Coleman reviews the sparse file, his brow furrowing. Ma'am, this shows the subject is 78 years old with no criminal record. What's the actual threat assessment? The threat isn't to him, it's to others if his identity is compromised. Catherine clarifies, and potentially to the integrity of ongoing federal investigations if his detention is related to his former work. As her team prepares, Catherine makes a direct call to the FBI director in Washington, D.C., bypassing the normal chain of command. The conversation is brief, but results in immediate authorization at the highest level, including provisions to supersede local jurisdiction if necessary. Meanwhile, at the precinct, the atmosphere begins to shift as officers notice unmarked vehicles with government plates establishing positions around the building perimeter. Officer Ryan Peterson points them out to his partner, nervousness evident in his voice. That's the 3rd federal car in the last 5 minutes. Something's happening. Captain Frank Reynolds, a 27-year veteran whose leadership style relies heavily on intimidation, emerges from his office to investigate the commotion. Upon seeing the vehicles, his face hardens. "Get back to work," he barks at the officers gathering by the windows. "And process that old troublemaker from the courthouse. Miller wants him charged with resisting arrest and assaulting an officer." Officer Peterson's eyes widen in disbelief. "Sir, I saw the courthouse video. The old man didn't resist or assault anyone. He was just standing there when they grabbed him." Captain Reynolds steps closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "Are you calling Sergeant Miller a liar, Peterson? Because that's a career-limiting move in my precinct." As Peterson retreats, Captain Reynolds returns to his office, drawing the blinds and making a phone call to Judge Crawford. In the secure holding area, Joseph Washington sits motionless on the metal bench, his eyes closed as if meditating, though his mind is meticulously counting seconds, calculating distances, and preparing for what he knows is coming. Exactly 28 minutes have passed since his phone call. The glass doors of Richmond County Precinct swing open with decisive force as FBI Director Catherine Reynolds strides through, flanked by Agents Coleman and Chen, all 3 wearing tactical vests beneath their suit jackets, badges prominently displayed. The police station's normal bustle freezes as a dozen officers register the federal presence, conversations dying mid-sentence, paperwork forgotten in hands suddenly gone still. Officer Ryan Peterson, stationed at the front desk, stands up so quickly his chair rolls backward into the wall with a dull thud that echoes through the suddenly silent room. Have you ever witnessed a moment when power dynamics shift so dramatically you can feel it in the air? Do you believe there are times when justice requires someone with authority to intervene against corruption? Comment number 1. If you think federal agencies should have oversight over local police departments, or comment number 2, if you believe local authorities should handle their own affairs without outside interference. Make sure to like and subscribe to see exactly how this high-stakes confrontation unfolds. Can 3 FBI agents really take on an entire police precinct? What could this elderly man possibly know that would warrant such an extraordinary response? Federal Bureau of Investigation? Catherine announces, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. I'm Director Reynolds. We're here for the immediate release of Joseph Washington, taken into custody approximately 30 minutes ago. Officer Peterson fumbles with his computer fingers, trembling slightly as he types, but Captain Frank Reynolds emerges from his office before any information appears on screen, his broad shoulders pushing through the gathering officers, face flushed with territorial anger. This is my precinct, and whoever you're looking for is under local jurisdiction now, he declares deliberately, stopping short of examining Catherine's credentials. Any federal business can be conducted through proper channels. I suggest you make an appointment with the district attorney. Catherine's expression remains impassive as she extends a federal warrant. This isn't a request, Captain Reynolds. Mr. Washington is being removed to federal custody under national security protocols effective immediately. She signals to Agent Coleman, who moves toward the holding cells without waiting for permission. Captain Reynolds steps into his path, hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. Nobody accesses my cells without my authorization. Washington was arrested for assaulting officers of this department during court proceedings. He'll be processed according to standard procedure. Director Reynolds steps closer, her voice lowering to ensure only the captain can hear her next words. Captain, I have authorization from the Office of the Attorney General to supersede local jurisdiction. I also have a tactical team surrounding this building and a helicopter 2 minutes out. How this proceeds is entirely your choice, but Mr. Washington will be leaving with us. The standoff crackles with tension as officers throughout the precinct subtly adjust their positions, some moving closer to their captain, others deliberately stepping back from what they sense could become a career-ending confrontation. Across the room, Officer James Taylor watches the scene unfold, his mind racing through scenarios before settling on a decision. Quietly, he slips through a side door toward the holding cells, retrieving a set of transfer paperwork from his desk drawer. In the main holding cell, Joseph Washington notices Taylor's approach, reading the officer's intentions in his hurried movements and furtive glances. When Taylor unlocks the cell, Joseph rises smoothly, his apparent frailty melting away as he stands to his full height. Processing for transfer, Taylor announces loudly for the benefit of other detainees, roughly taking Joseph's arm and guiding him not toward the main booking area, but toward a rarely used emergency exit at the rear of the building. County jail's expecting you, Taylor mutters as they approach the door leading to the parking lot where a patrol car waits, engine running. Captain thinks we can transfer you out before the feds cut through the red tape. Joseph moves with cooperative docility until they reach the doorway, where he plants his feet, turning slightly to look directly into Taylor's eyes. His voice, when he finally speaks, carries none of the tremor expected from a man his age, instead resonating with calm authority. Son, there are snipers on every rooftop within 300 yards. I suggest you reconsider. Taylor's head snaps up, scanning the surrounding buildings, his grip on Joseph's arm slackening just enough. The door they're approaching bursts open, revealing Agent Marcus Coleman, weapon holstered but ready, accompanied by 2 tactical team members in full gear. Federal custody, Coleman states, simply showing his badge. Step away from the subject, Officer Taylor. As Taylor's hand instinctively moves toward his sidearm, laser targeting dots appear on his chest. 3 perfectly steady red points confirming Joseph's warning about snipers. Taylor's hand freezes, then slowly raises in surrender as Agent Coleman secures Joseph. No harm intended. Taylor manages sweat beading visibly on his forehead, just following orders to process the prisoner. Coleman secures Joseph without handcuffs, treating him with a respect that clearly confuses Taylor. "Mr. Washington isn't a prisoner," Coleman corrects, escorting Joseph toward a side entrance where Catherine waits with Agent Chen, who has successfully secured all surveillance footage from the precinct. In the main lobby, Captain Reynolds watches with impotent fury as federal agents systematically establish control of his precinct, setting up a temporary command post and restricting officer movements. This is an overreach, he protests to Catherine, who has returned after ensuring Joseph's safety. "Whatever you think this old man is, you're mistaken. He's just some troublemaker who interfered with court proceedings." Catherine regards him coolly. "Captain, as of this moment, your precinct is under federal authority pending investigation. Your officers will surrender their weapons to my agents and remain on premises until individually cleared for departure." She hands him official documentation bearing the Attorney General's seal. "This grants us access to all facilities' documents and digital systems within this department. Full compliance is mandatory." As this unprecedented takeover unfolds, Joseph Washington undergoes a remarkable transformation before the eyes of stunned officers. The stooped posture straightens, revealing a man several inches taller than he'd appeared. His movements, previously slow and deliberate, take on a precise efficiency that speaks of decades of tactical training. When offered water by Agent Chen, he accepts the bottle and performs a subtle but expert check for tampering before drinking, a habit ingrained through years in hostile territory. Joseph's eyes, sharp and evaluative, scan the room with professional assessment, noting exits, vulnerabilities, and potential threats with the practiced efficiency of a career operative. He identifies Sergeant Miller, who has arrived at the precinct following news of the FBI presence, and catalogs Officers Taylor and Reynolds along with Captain Frank Reynolds as the primary offenders in his mistreatment. His gaze lingers on each, memorizing details with the same precision that once helped him identify Soviet operatives in crowded diplomatic receptions. "Director Reynolds." Joseph addresses Catherine, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention despite speaking softly. "I appreciate the prompt response, but there's something larger happening in Richmond County than my inconvenient detention. With your permission, I'd like to explain why I activated the emergency protocol." Catherine nods, leading him toward the captain's office, which has been secured by federal agents. As Joseph passes Captain Reynolds, he pauses momentarily. "The handcuffs were unnecessary," he observes calmly, "but they've provided an unexpected opportunity to address some long overdue matters of justice in your department." The captain's face contorts with confusion and anger as Joseph continues toward the office, walking with the straight-backed confidence of a man who has navigated far more dangerous situations than a small-town police precinct. The Richmond FBI field office transforms into an operational command center within hours of Joseph Washington's extraction from the precinct, with analysts, technology specialists, and civil rights investigators converting the usually quiet building into a hub of focused activity. In the main conference room, Joseph sits at the head of the table, his weathered hands spread across documents arranged with methodical precision. Arrest records, court transcripts, property deeds, and statistical analyses. The fruits of months of careful investigation conducted without any official sanction or authority. Catherine Reynolds stands nearby, absorbing the breadth of evidence with growing concern as Joseph explains the pattern he's uncovered. "My grandson Marcus was pulled over 6 months ago while driving through Oak Ridge Heights." Joseph begins, his voice carrying the measured cadence of a professor delivering a crucial lecture. "Supposedly for a broken taillight, though our mechanic confirmed the light was functioning perfectly. The officers claimed they smelled marijuana and searched his vehicle, allegedly finding 10 grams in the glove compartment. Marcus has never used drugs. He's a scholarship student with Olympic track aspirations." Joseph slides forward a precisely organized folder containing Marcus's academic records, drug test results from his athletic program, and testimonials from coaches and professors. When I began investigating his case, I discovered something disturbing. In the past 5 years, 376 black citizens have been arrested in Richmond County on similar pretextual stops. Of those, 241 cases went before Judge Crawford. The conviction rate for black defendants in his courtroom is 92% compared to 27% for white defendants facing identical charges. Agent Danielle Chen, reviewing the statistical analysis Joseph has compiled, shakes her head in disbelief. These numbers are beyond statistical anomaly. They're evidence of systemic discrimination. But proving intent has always been the challenge in these cases. Joseph's expression remains calm as he reaches into his briefcase, removing a small digital recorder. "Intent won't be difficult to establish," he says, pressing play. Sergeant Miller's voice fills the room with crystal clarity. "Crawford knows what to do. Just make sure the evidence looks clean. He'll handle the jury selection like always." Judge Crawford's distinctive baritone responds, "I'm tired of these people moving into our neighborhoods, Miller. Your department keeps the streets clean. I keep the courtroom clean. That's the arrangement." The recording continues with explicit discussions of how to ensure convictions for black defendants, including strategies for eliminating potential black jurors and applying harsher sentences than those given to white defendants for identical offenses. Catherine's expression hardens as she listens. "How did you obtain these recordings, Mr. Washington?" Joseph allows himself a small smile. "Old habits." Director Reynolds: "I may be retired, but certain skills remain useful. I've been attending court sessions for months, gathering evidence on the pretense of supporting various defendants. My age and appearance make me effectively invisible to people like Miller and Crawford. They see only an old black man, never a threat." He produces additional recordings, each meticulously labeled and documented. There are 27 separate conversations, all legally obtained in public spaces or areas without expectation of privacy. Meanwhile, at the Richmond County precinct, the FBI investigation expands as agents discover a hidden archive behind a false wall in the records room, files never digitized, never reported in official statistics. Agent Coleman breaks the lock, revealing hundreds of manila folders containing altered evidence reports, falsified witness statements, and booking photos with racial slurs handwritten across them. Most disturbing are the tally sheets, unofficial records of which officers had made the most arrests in predominantly black neighborhoods, with bonus points awarded for arrests leading to felony convictions. Agent Coleman photographs everything before carefully preserving the documents as evidence. "Director," he reports to Catherine via secure line, "we've found what appears to be an internal record-keeping system for targeting black citizens. Some of these documents have District Attorney Victor Phillips's initials approving dismissed complaints against officers." The investigation broadens further when Joseph connects the law enforcement pattern to property records, spreading maps across the conference table showing how aggressive policing concentrated in specific neighborhoods correlates with property devaluation and subsequent land acquisition. Captain Reynolds appears in property records through shell companies, Joseph explains, highlighting transaction dates. When black homeowners are forced out through systematic harassment, intimidation, or incarceration, property values temporarily plummet. These areas are then acquired by Riverside Development LLC, which is partially owned by Gregory Phillips, the captain's brother-in-law. Catherine studies the pattern with growing outrage. They're weaponizing the police department for real estate speculation, targeting black neighborhoods, driving residents out, then profiting from redevelopment. As evidence mounts, a nervous Officer Pete Simmons approaches Agent Chen requesting protective custody in exchange for testimony. In a recorded interview, Simmons reveals, "It started small. Captain Reynolds told us to focus patrols in problem areas, but the only problem was that black families were moving in. Then came unofficial quotas. Officers who didn't make enough arrests in these neighborhoods were assigned to overnight shifts or dangerous areas. Those who excelled got promotions over time and choice assignments." Simmons describes competitions among officers for targeting black citizens with monthly tallies posted in the break room disguised as community safety metrics. He produces text messages from Sergeant Miller explicitly instructing officers to find pretexts for stopping black drivers in affluent neighborhoods. Miller told us that residents were complaining about the changing demographics and that Judge Crawford wanted us to maintain community standards however necessary. The investigation soon uncovers direct financial incentives. Records show Captain Reynolds receiving monthly bonuses not documented in official payroll, coinciding with increased arrest rates in targeted neighborhoods. Judge Crawford's financial disclosures reveal investments in private correctional facilities that house Richmond County inmates, a clear conflict of interest never reported to the Judicial Ethics Committee. By evening, the FBI has established a secure perimeter around both the precinct and courthouse, with agents methodically documenting decades of systematic discrimination hidden behind a veneer of law enforcement. Joseph Washington, whose morning began in handcuffs on a courthouse floor, now stands at the center of what is rapidly evolving into one of the most significant civil rights investigations in recent Virginia history. When Agent Coleman asks how an elderly man managed to compile such comprehensive evidence without resources or official authority, Joseph answers with quiet dignity, "I spent decades gathering intelligence behind enemy lines with nothing but my wits. Exposing corruption in my own community required the same patience, the same attention to detail, and the same absolute conviction that truth ultimately prevails over power. The only difference is that this time the freedom at stake is my grandson's, and that makes the mission infinitely more personal." The investigation shifts perspective as FBI agents tap Sergeant Bradley Miller's phone, revealing the depth of his hatred in real time. Pacing his living room that evening, Miller speaks frantically to Judge Crawford, unaware that every word feeds directly into the FBI surveillance system. "They've got Washington in protective custody," Miller seethes, knocking back his third whiskey since arriving home. "Some Fed named Reynolds is running the show, turning my precinct upside down. They've seized records, computers, everything." The audio captures Crawford's measured response, the judge's courtroom composure cracking under pressure. "Calm down, Bradley. What could they possibly find? We've been careful." Miller's bitter laugh resonates through the speakers in the FBI monitoring station. "Careful. The old man had a recorder, Hamilton. God knows how long he's been gathering evidence." The conversation continues with increasing desperation as they discuss reaching out to State Senator William Barnes, whose campaign they've supported with both donations and selective enforcement against political opponents. Meanwhile, Agent Chen delves into Miller's background, uncovering disturbing connections to white supremacist organizations dating back to his teenage years. His father, former Officer Richard Miller, was dismissed from the Richmond police force in 1987 for excessive force against civil rights protesters, but continued influencing his son's development. Personnel files reveal that despite multiple civilian complaints and concerning performance evaluations noting differential treatment of minorities, Miller received consistent promotions, often directly following Judge Crawford's recommendations to the police commissioner. His father instilled this mission. Agent Chen reports to Catherine, displaying photographs of teenage Bradley attending white power rallies alongside his father. He doesn't just carry bias, he sees himself as a soldier protecting Richmond from what he calls demographic infection. His academy psychological evaluation flagged concerns, but they were overridden by Captain Stevens, Judge Crawford's brother-in-law at the time. As predicted, Senator Barnes calls the Attorney General's office that evening, claiming the Richmond investigation constitutes political persecution against dedicated public servants. The Deputy Attorney General contacts Catherine directly, suggesting she proceed with appropriate caution regarding politically sensitive matters. Catherine's response is unwavering. "Sir, with respect, we've uncovered evidence of systematic civil rights violations spanning decades. This isn't political, it's criminal. I'd be happy to brief the Attorney General personally, but this investigation will continue." Joseph, meanwhile, secures permission to visit Marcus in jail, the young man's eyes widening with disbelief as his scholarly grandfather explains portions of his classified background for the first time. All those research trips, Marcus whispers, connecting disparate memories from childhood, Berlin, Moscow, Johannesburg. Joseph nods, taking his grandson's hands across the visitation table. Academic cover for intelligence work, yes, but that life ended decades ago. What matters now is using those skills to secure your freedom and expose the corruption that put you here. Marcus struggles to reconcile this new reality. The gentle grandfather who taught him chess and history now revealed as something altogether different. They won't stop coming after us, will they? Even if we win this case. Joseph's expression grows solemn. Powerful people are threatened, and yes, they'll fight back. But remember what I've always taught you about justice. It doesn't depend on the powerful choosing to be fair. It depends on the determined refusing to accept anything less. As they speak, FBI data analysts discover the financial incentive structure behind Richmond County's discriminatory practices. Court records reveal that Judge Crawford D.A. Phillips and Captain Reynolds all serve on advisory boards for Patriot Corrections Corporation, a private prison company that receives higher per-inmate payments for facilities maintaining minimum 90% occupancy rates. The targeting of black citizens directly feeds this system, ensuring cells remain filled and profits steady. Document trails show campaign contributions from Patriot Corrections to Senator Barnes, coinciding with his sponsorship of legislation expanding private prison contracts. Back at the precinct now under FBI control, Sergeant Miller attempts remote access to delete incriminating files from the department's server, unaware that federal technicians have already mirrored all data and are monitoring access attempts. Agent Coleman confronts Miller by phone, advising him that tampering with evidence has been added to the growing list of potential charges. Cornered and desperate, Miller makes a critical mistake. You have no idea how high this goes. The Governor's Office State Judiciary Committee, they all understand what we're doing is necessary. Richmond stays safe because people like me keep certain elements controlled. Agent Coleman records this admission, adding it to evidence of conspiracy reaching beyond local officials. Throughout the night, Joseph works alongside FBI analysts, his encyclopedic memory connecting disparate pieces of evidence that younger agents might miss. His intelligence training provides context for coded language and department memos about community standards and quality of life enforcement, euphemisms for the systematic harassment of black citizens. Catherine observes his methodical approach with growing respect, recognizing the same precision and attention to detail that once made him valuable in Cold War intelligence operations, now directed toward domestic justice. "You never really retired, did you?" she asks during a rare quiet moment as they review documents together. Joseph looks up, his eyes reflecting decades of witnessing both international and domestic injustice. From the agency, yes. From the work of protecting American ideals. That oath doesn't expire, Director Reynolds. Whether the threat comes from foreign adversaries or our own corrupted institutions, the mission remains the same: to defend the principles this country claims to stand for, especially when it fails to live up to them. As dawn breaks over Richmond, the investigation has established clear patterns of civil rights violations, financial corruption, and abuse of authority, a conspiracy of power that has operated unchecked for generations, destroying countless lives while enriching those sworn to uphold justice. For Joseph Washington, the elderly man dismissed as irrelevant by those who arrested him just 24 hours earlier, the pieces have aligned for a reckoning decades in the making. His grandson's case, initially a personal mission, has expanded into something that could transform justice in Richmond County for generations to come. The morning after the FBI takeover of Richmond County Precinct, Joseph Washington returns home to find his modest two-story colonial house vandalized, windows shattered, racial slurs spray-painted across the porch, and a crude doll hanging from his oak tree, a visual threat unmistakable in its historical context. Standing amid the destruction, Joseph photographs everything with methodical precision. Before the FBI evidence team arrives, his expression betraying none of the anger or fear the perpetrators intended to provoke. Have you ever wondered what gives someone the strength to face hatred without flinching? What would you do if confronted with intimidation meant to silence you? Comment. Number 1. If you believe exposing corruption is worth the personal risk or comment. Number 2. If you think Joseph should prioritize his safety over justice. Hit that like button if you're inspired by his courage, and subscribe to see how far these corrupt officials will go to protect their power. Can one elderly man really bring down an entire system of injustice, or will those threatening him succeed in silencing the truth? Amateurs. Joseph murmurs carefully, collecting fragments of brick thrown through his living room window, noting the lack of gloves used, potential fingerprint evidence preserved by carelessness. Director Catherine Reynolds arrives personally, her face tightening with anger at the scene. "We can place you in protective custody, Mr. Washington. These are not people who limit themselves to intimidation." Joseph shakes his head, running his hand along the door frame where he subtly marked his own height. "The measurements are off by half an inch. Whoever did this was watching the house, waited until I left with your agents, then struck quickly. Local knowledge, not professional." He points to footprints in the flower bed. 3 perpetrators, one significantly heavier than the others, all wearing standard-issue police boots. They wanted this to look like random vandalism, but couldn't help sending a professional message. Catherine marvels at his observational skills despite his age. "You're still analyzing scenes like an operative." Joseph allows himself a small smile. "Old habits. More importantly, I anticipated this response." He leads her to his garage, where he enters a code into what appears to be a standard security system panel. A hidden compartment opens, revealing sophisticated surveillance equipment. "I installed this when Marcus was first arrested. Every approach to the house is monitored with backup power and cloud storage, inaccessible to local authorities." The FBI technical team arrives, integrating Joseph's surprisingly advanced security system with their own protective measures. Meanwhile, Marcus's trial continues now, with federal observers present in Judge Crawford's courtroom. The judge maintains a veneer of propriety while his eyes track the federal agents with barely concealed hostility. During recesses, court clerk Jessica Winters observes Crawford, making frequent calls from his chambers, often emerging more agitated after each conversation. Joseph, now allowed to attend proceedings without harassment, notices subtle changes in prosecution strategy. Charges against Marcus, suddenly modified evidence previously deemed critical, now downplayed. Behind the scenes, Crawford coordinates with Captain Reynolds and D.A. Phillips, their desperation growing as FBI investigations uncover more connections. "The old man must be discredited," Crawford insists during a secure call intercepted by FBI surveillance. "Use his age against him. Plant stories about cognitive decline medication issues. Anything to suggest he's fabricating allegations due to confusion or dementia." Captain Reynolds agrees. "I've got officers loyal to the department who'll swear he's been acting erratically for months. We'll create a paper trail suggesting previous incidents of confusion or paranoia." Back at FBI headquarters, Catherine faces challenges from within when Deputy Director Lawrence Mercer questions resource allocation. "You've deployed 26 agents and technical specialists to a local corruption case," he notes during a video conference. "The Richmond field office budget can't sustain this level of operation without justification beyond standard civil rights violations." Catherine stands firm. "Sir, this case involves systematic corruption throughout law enforcement and judiciary, potentially reaching state government. The pattern suggests decades of coordinated civil rights violations affecting thousands of cases." The situation intensifies when Thomas Clark arrives in Richmond, his retirement temporarily suspended by direct request from the FBI director. The 74-year-old former assistant director commands immediate respect as he enters the field office, moving directly to Catherine's temporary command center. "I've reviewed your preliminary findings," Clark announces authorizing additional resources with his still active security clearance. Washington's assessment is consistent with his operational history, methodical, evidence-based, and unfortunately accurate. The director has approved expanded jurisdiction and resources. Joseph conducts parallel investigation through his own network, contacting former academic colleagues now in influential positions. His careful cultivation of relationships over decades proves valuable as retired judges, civil rights attorneys, and investigative journalists discreetly provide additional information on Crawford's history and connections. Most significantly, Joseph discovers offshore accounts in Captain Reynolds's name, receiving regular payments traced to shell companies owned by Patriot Corrections Corporation. Financial records reveal identical payment structures for Judge Crawford and D.A. Phillips, all carefully concealed through multiple layers of corporate entities. State Senator Barnes appears connected through legislation he sponsored benefiting private prisons while receiving substantial campaign contributions from the same sources. As Joseph compiles this evidence, a young officer named Michael Robinson approaches him after court one day, nervously glancing around the parking garage before speaking. "Mr. Washington, not everyone in the department supports what's happening. Some of us joined to actually protect and serve." He slips Joseph a USB drive. This contains internal communications about how they integrate new officers. If you question their methods, you're assigned to dangerous areas without backup or terminated for fabricated violations. They call it acclimatization, gradually normalizing discrimination until officers either participate or leave. Robinson describes how new recruits face subtle tests of their willingness to participate in discriminatory practices, beginning with seemingly reasonable instructions to focus on high-crime areas that consistently correspond with black neighborhoods. The racial component is never explicit at first, Robinson explains. They talk about statistical policing and community standards. By the time officers realize they're enforcing something deeply wrong, they're already complicit. The pressure escalates further when Joseph's home is targeted again, this time with a more sophisticated approach. A delivery driver leaves a package containing surveillance photos of Marcus in the prison yard with a digital timer attached. Not a bomb, but a psychological tactic implying they can reach his grandson any time. FBI bomb technicians secure the device while Joseph notes details about the package that local criminals would never consider. Professional surveillance angles, specific timing to avoid standard prison security rotations. "This isn't street-level intimidation anymore," he tells Catherine. "They're employing tactics I recognize from counterintelligence operations. Someone with training is advising them." As threats intensify, Joseph remains resolute, his decades of operating under extreme pressure evident in his unwavering focus. Each attempt at intimidation is methodically documented, analyzed, and incorporated into the expanding federal investigation, while local power structures mobilize against him with increasing desperation. Joseph's lifetime of disciplined intelligence work transforms what began as a personal mission into something the corrupt officials of Richmond County never anticipated, a precisely executed operation to dismantle systemic injustice from within. Joseph Washington sits at the center of an expanding web of investigation. The conference room walls now covered with connection diagrams linking officials, corporations, and cases across decades of Richmond County history. FBI analysts move around him like satellites orbiting a calm center, bringing documents for his review, seeking guidance on historical connections, and marveling at his ability to recall specific details from cases going back 20 years. Director Catherine Reynolds enters with coffee for both of them, having adapted to Joseph's precise preparation preferences. Black cooled exactly 3 minutes before drinking, no stirring that might introduce contaminants, habits formed during years of operational caution. "We've identified 27 cases with clear evidence tampering." Catherine reports, sliding a tablet with case summaries across the table. "All involving black defendants, all prosecuted by Phillips, all presided over by Crawford. In each case, arresting officers were Miller Taylor or officers directly under Miller's supervision. Joseph nods, unsurprised by the pattern. These create the foundation for a comprehensive civil rights investigation that can withstand political pressure. The pattern is undeniable, the evidence irrefutable. Together, they develop a methodical strategy for dismantling the corrupt network. First, they identify historical cases where evidence tampering is provable through forensic examination. Fingerprints missing from evidence bags, chain of custody forms with falsified signatures, body cam footage with suspicious gaps. Each case becomes a building block in establishing the pattern required for federal civil rights charges. They systematically approach former defendants, many initially reluctant to revisit traumatic experiences with a justice system that failed them. Joseph's presence proves crucial, his age and dignity resonating with community members who recognize him as someone who understands their experiences. "I'm not asking you to trust the system," he tells each potential witness. "I'm asking you to help change it." Meanwhile, Sergeant Miller, Officer Taylor, and Captain Reynolds implement their own counter-strategy, leaking modified portions of Marcus's arrest record to local media outlets attempting to paint the Washington family as career criminals manipulating federal authorities. Joseph, anticipating this move, had already arranged an interview with Elise Montgomery, a respected national journalist whose investigative work has exposed similar corruption in other jurisdictions. During their recorded conversation, Joseph partially reveals his government service without compromising classified information. "I served this country for decades in ways I still cannot fully disclose," he explains, his dignified presence compelling on camera. "That service taught me that injustice thrives in silence and darkness. What's happening in Richmond County isn't about my grandson alone. It's about hundreds of families systematically targeted because of their race." The interview airs nationally, shifting the narrative and bringing uncomfortable scrutiny to Richmond's power structure. Judge Crawford, feeling mounting pressure, contacts his former clerk, Jessica Winters, who witnessed his discriminatory sentencing patterns for 3 years before leaving to attend law school. Unbeknownst to Crawford, Winters has already approached the FBI, voluntarily troubled by her former role in an unjust system. When Crawford calls, offering money for her silence. The conversation is recorded with her consent, capturing explicit instructions to lie about court procedures if questioned by federal investigators. DA Victor Phillips, seeing the mounting evidence, makes the calculated decision to save himself. He approaches Catherine, offering full cooperation in exchange for consideration during sentencing. His testimony proves devastatingly comprehensive, revealing a decade-long conspiracy to maintain Richmond County's racial power structure through selective prosecution. The criteria were explicit, but never written down, Phillips admits in his recorded statement. Maximum charges for black defendants, minimum charges or dismissals for white defendants with similar circumstances. Jury selection strategies designed to minimize black jurors. Evidence handling procedures that Judge Crawford would overlook for certain defendants but enforce strictly for others. Phillips provides names, dates, and specific cases where evidence was planted, testimony coerced, or exculpatory information withheld, particularly in cases involving black citizens arrested in predominantly white neighborhoods. While building the broader case, Joseph focuses intensely on freeing Marcus, working alongside public defender Lisa Chin, who has renewed her dedication to the case with FBI resources now supporting her efforts. The forensic team discovers Officer Taylor's fingerprints inside Marcus's glove compartment in areas that would be impossible to reach during a normal traffic stop search. Evidence the compartment was opened before the official search, supporting the theory that drugs were planted after the initial stop. Further analysis of residue patterns indicates the drugs were inserted after the vehicle was impounded, not during the roadside search as claimed in police reports. "The pattern is clear," Joseph explains to Catherine, pointing to similar inconsistencies in 12 other cases. Traffic stop for minor or non-existent violation, followed by claimed probable cause for search, followed by discovery of precisely enough drugs to justify felony charges, but not enough to suggest intent to distribute. keeping it in local jurisdiction rather than triggering federal interest. This systematic approach creates a legal battering ram directed at Richmond County's corrupt foundation. While federal agents build the case for widespread civil rights violations and conspiracy charges, Joseph leverages his intelligence background to predict and counter each defensive move by Crawford Reynolds and their allies. When Senator Barnes attempts to pressure the Attorney General through political channels, Joseph's meticulous financial documentation revealing the senator's connections to private prison corporations neutralizes his influence. When local media outlets friendly to the established power structure attempt to question Joseph's credibility, the testimony of former intelligence colleagues, now in prominent positions throughout government, quickly silences the criticism. At the FBI Command Center, Agent Coleman summarizes the situation to the expanding investigative team. "We're not just building a case against individual corrupt officials. Mr. Washington has helped us map an entire ecosystem of discrimination showing how each component, police courts, prosecution, political protection, and financial incentives, works together to maintain systematic oppression while creating plausible deniability." Joseph, listening from his position at the strategy table, allows himself a brief smile of satisfaction. For a man who spent decades in the shadows working against foreign adversaries who never knew his name, this final mission bringing justice to his own community represents a fitting culmination of a lifetime of service, conducted with the same precision, patience, and absolute determination that once made him one of America's most valuable intelligence assets. The Department of Justice announcement comes at precisely 9:00 a.m. Eastern Time, broadcast simultaneously across all major networks and streaming platforms. A coordinated media strategy designed by Joseph Washington himself, drawing on his experience managing international intelligence operations. The United States Department of Justice is announcing a formal civil rights investigation into systematic discrimination within the Richmond County criminal justice system. The Attorney General declares, from a Washington podium flanked by senior officials, "Evidence indicates widespread constitutional violations affecting hundreds of cases over multiple decades. This investigation will examine all aspects of the system, including police practices, prosecutorial conduct, judicial proceedings, and potential financial conflicts of interest." As the announcement reverberates across the country, FBI tactical teams execute synchronized raids throughout Richmond County. At the courthouse, Judge Hamilton Crawford's morning docket is interrupted when federal agents enter courtroom 307, badges displayed prominently. The lead agent approaches the bench without waiting for acknowledgement. "Hamilton Crawford, you're under arrest for conspiracy against rights, obstruction of justice, and violation of oath of office under color of law." The courtroom erupts in shock as the distinguished judge is handcuffed and led out before stunned attorneys, defendants, and spectators. Simultaneously, agents arrest Captain Frank Reynolds while he reviews shift assignments in the precinct conference room. Sergeant Bradley Miller is taken into custody at his home, still wearing a bathrobe when agents breach his door with a tactical entry team. Officers James Taylor and Derek Reynolds are arrested during patrol shift change, their colleagues watching in stunned silence as they're escorted to unmarked vehicles. District Attorney Victor Phillips, already cooperating with authorities, surrenders voluntarily at the FBI field office. 3 county commissioners with connections to the private prison scheme are apprehended at their respective offices and homes. Most significantly, Senator William Barnes holds an emergency press conference announcing his immediate resignation, citing unspecified health concerns, a transparent attempt to distance himself from the unfolding investigation after being informed of pending federal charges. Joseph Washington observes these operations from the FBI Command Center, his expression betraying nothing of the satisfaction he must feel witnessing justice finally reaching those who believed themselves untouchable. His focus remains on Marcus's case, which has become the linchpin in exposing the broader conspiracy. "The raid seizing courthouse records is the most critical," he notes to Catherine. Judge Crawford maintained a separate set of instructions for each case involving black defendants documented in his private chambers rather than official court records. True to Joseph's intelligence, agents discover a hidden safe in Crawford's chambers containing handwritten notes detailing strategies for ensuring convictions regardless of evidence. Specific instructions for excluding particular juror demographics. Procedural decisions designed to disadvantage defense attorneys, and sentencing guidelines explicitly harsher for black defendants. The grand jury convenes the following morning with Joseph as the primary witness. For 7 hours he testifies with precision and detail that astonishes even veteran prosecutors. Without notes, he recounts specific dates, conversations, legal proceedings, and patterns of conduct spanning years of observation. His testimony, combined with evidence from Officer Robinson and other whistleblowers who have come forward since the initial arrests, results in 87 criminal counts across 17 indictments. Most powerfully, Joseph presents the human cost of the corruption. Families destroyed by wrongful convictions. Homes lost to predatory forfeiture careers, derailed by fabricated criminal records, and communities systematically denied equal protection under law. As Joseph concludes his testimony, the lead prosecutor asks about his methodology in compiling such comprehensive evidence without official resources. I applied the same analytical approach I used during my government service. Joseph responds carefully, avoiding classified details. Patience pattern recognition and the absolute conviction that no operation, however well protected by power or tradition, is impervious to the truth when methodically exposed. The following day, Marcus Washington's case is dismissed with prejudice after an emergency hearing where newly appointed special prosecutor Eleanor Jackson presents evidence of officer misconduct directly related to his arrest. The judge brought in from a neighboring county to ensure impartiality orders Marcus's immediate release while condemning the shocking pattern of misconduct that undermines the integrity of our entire justice system. Joseph waits outside the county detention center as Marcus emerges into the sunlight free for the first time in 6 months. Their embrace captures the attention of assembled media, becoming the human face of a story rapidly expanding beyond Richmond County. Alongside them stands a team of civil rights attorneys announcing a class action lawsuit on behalf of all wrongfully convicted individuals from Richmond County over the past decade. A case that will eventually result in over $100 million in damages paid to victims of the corrupt system. The FBI investigation continues expanding as analysts uncover 46 cases of wrongful convictions directly tied to the corrupt officials, with hundreds more requiring review. Catherine establishes a dedicated task force to examine every case prosecuted under Judge Crawford and D.A. Phillips, creating a specialized unit focusing particularly on cases with evidence of racial bias. As the first week of arrests and revelations concludes, Joseph meets with Catherine in her office, reviewing the progress and next steps. "This is just the beginning," he observes, studying the case map now covering an entire wall. "The system they created affected thousands of lives over decades. Dismantling it properly will require the same patience and thoroughness that built our case." Catherine nods in agreement. "We've allocated resources for a minimum 2-year investigation. Every case will be reviewed, every victim identified and compensated if possible." She hesitates before adding, "Your contribution has been extraordinary, Mr. Washington. The Bureau would welcome your continued consultation in an official capacity." Joseph considers the offer, his weathered hands tracing connections on the evidence board. "My operational days are long behind me, Director Reynolds, but seeing this through, ensuring Marcus and others receive true justice. For that mission, I remain at your disposal." As he prepares to leave, Joseph pauses at the door. "One more thing, Director. The most valuable intelligence I gathered during my career came not from dramatic operations, but from patient observation of patterns others dismissed as insignificant. Remember that as you continue this work, the most damaging corruption rarely announces itself. It hides in plain sight, protected by our reluctance to believe systems we trust could be fundamentally compromised." With these words, the former intelligence operative who became the catalyst for dismantling decades of systemic racism departs walking with the straight-backed dignity of a man who has served his country in ways few will ever know, and who in his twilight years may have performed his most important service of all. 6 months after the arrests that shook Richmond County's power structure to its foundation, Joseph Washington sits at a polished oak desk in what was once Judge Crawford's chambers, now repurposed as the administrative center for the Richmond Community Justice Initiative. Sunlight streams through windows once hidden behind heavy curtains, illuminating walls now covered with resources for legal assistance, housing support, and employment opportunities. Where Crawford once presided over a system of discrimination, Joseph now oversees the painstaking work of restoration and healing. Mr. Jefferson, based on our review of your case, we've filed motion for immediate expungement, Joseph explains to a 42-year-old man seated across from him, one of 17 former inmates meeting with the center today. The job placement program has 3 employers ready to interview you next week, and temporary housing is available until you secure steady income. Jefferson, wrongfully convicted of drug possession 8 years earlier under Crawford's jurisdiction, struggles to maintain composure. "I never thought I'd see this day, sir, after what they did to me, to my family." Joseph reaches across the desk, his weathered hand resting briefly on the younger man's shoulder. A gesture of understanding words cannot adequately express. "The system failed you, Mr. Jefferson. We cannot return those years, but we can ensure your future isn't defined by that injustice." This scene repeats throughout the day as Joseph meets with men and women whose lives were derailed by Richmond County's corrupt criminal justice system. The Community Justice Center, funded by the $37 million settlement against the county and Patriot Corrections Corporation, has become the headquarters for what many call the Washington Reconstruction, a comprehensive effort to identify and assist every victim of the systematic discrimination now exposed. In an adjacent office, Marcus Washington, now employed as a paralegal with the Innocence Project, reviews case files with the focused intensity he once applied to his academic studies. His experience has transformed him from a college student with Olympic aspirations to a passionate advocate for criminal justice reform. When visitors express surprise at his lack of bitterness, Marcus explains, "My grandfather taught me that anger is justified, but allowing it to consume you serves those who wronged you. The most powerful response to injustice is creating lasting change that prevents others from suffering the same fate." The scale of corruption continues expanding as investigations progress. Catherine Reynolds, recently promoted within the FBI for her role in exposing the conspiracy, has established a specialized unit focusing on systemic discrimination within law enforcement agencies nationwide, using Richmond as a case study for identifying warning signs. Her team has developed protocols for detecting statistical anomalies in arrest patterns, prosecution rates, and sentencing discrepancies that might indicate similar problems in other jurisdictions. "What we found in Richmond County wasn't unique," she explains during a Justice Department briefing. "It was just exceptionally well documented thanks to Mr. Washington's methodical approach. We're now applying those same analytical techniques to identify potential civil rights violations across multiple jurisdictions." The former corrupt officials face justice with varying outcomes. Judge Crawford receives 23 years in federal prison for multiple civil rights violations, racketeering, and corruption charges. Captain Reynolds is sentenced to 17 years after refusing cooperation deals. Sergeant Miller, facing the most severe charges, including evidence tampering in dozens of cases, accepts a plea agreement in exchange for testimony against higher officials, receiving 12 years with possibility of parole. District Attorney Phillips, having cooperated from the beginning, serves 7 years in a minimum security facility. Senator Barnes avoids prison through plea negotiations, but faces disgorgement of illicit profits and a lifetime ban from public office. Most significantly, the Richmond Police Department undergoes complete restructuring under federal supervision. Officer Michael Robinson, whose courage in coming forward proved crucial to the investigation, is appointed to lead a new accountability division with actual disciplinary authority. Community oversight boards with enforcement powers are established, and officers receive mandatory training on implicit bias and de-escalation techniques. Body cameras now upload footage to servers inaccessible to department personnel, preventing the technical malfunctions that conveniently occurred during controversial arrests in the past. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Joseph takes a rare break from his work at the center, accompanying Catherine to a community ceremony honoring those wrongfully convicted and now exonerated. The event, held in Freedom Park, draws hundreds of residents from across Richmond County. Families reunited after years of separation, community leaders who fought against the system for decades, and young activists inspired by the transformation unfolding before them. As Joseph watches families embrace loved ones who had been unjustly imprisoned, he reflects on the journey that brought him here. His thoughts drift to cold Moscow nights spent photographing documents that helped America navigate the Cold War, to tense moments in divided Berlin where a single misstep meant capture, or worse, to the day he officially died in intelligence records to protect his retirement and family. None of those missions, crucial as they were to national security, compare to the significance of what he has accomplished in Richmond County. Not merely exposing corruption, but helping rebuild a community shattered by generations of systemic injustice. When asked to speak, Joseph approaches the microphone with the same quiet dignity that has defined him throughout the ordeal. "I stand before you not as someone special, but as someone who simply refused to accept that power makes right." He begins his voice, carrying across the hushed gathering. Many have asked why at 78 years old I chose to fight this battle instead of enjoying retirement. The answer is simple. Justice delayed is still preferable to justice denied. Our community deserves institutions that protect rather than persecute, that serve rather than subjugate, that embody our highest ideals rather than our basest prejudices. He continues, acknowledging the pain suffered by so many families. What happened in Richmond County wasn't an aberration or the work of a few bad actors. It was a system functioning exactly as designed, to maintain power for some by denying rights to others. Dismantling such systems requires more than removing corrupt individuals. It demands creating new structures built on transparency, accountability, and equal protection under law. As Joseph concludes his remarks, Marcus joins him at the podium, representing the next generation committed to carrying forward the work of transformation. Together, they symbolize both the painful history and hopeful future of a community beginning to heal from decades of injustice. Later that evening, as Joseph and Marcus walk through the neighborhood Joseph has called home for 40 years, they pass the courthouse where their journey began, where an elderly black man was once handcuffed on the floor while an entire system assumed his powerlessness. "You never told them about Moscow," Marcus observes quietly. "Or Berlin or Johannesburg." Joseph smiles, his pace unhurried but purposeful. "Those operations served their purpose in their time. Some secrets belong to history. But what we've accomplished here in Richmond, this isn't classified. This is a template, a demonstration that even the most entrenched corruption cannot withstand the determined pursuit of justice." As twilight settles over Richmond County, the elderly man, once dismissed as irrelevant by those in power, continues his walk home, his legacy secured not in classified files or intelligent citations, but in the transformed lives of a community finding its way toward long-delayed justice. The courthouse that once symbolized oppression now stands as a monument to the truth. He has always known that power ultimately yields to principle when confronted with unwavering determination and methodical exposure of injustice. In the end, the most effective weapon against systemic discrimination proved to be not violence or vengeance, but the patient, precise application of truth by someone the system fatally underestimated. What do you think about Joseph's approach to fighting systemic injustice? Was his methodical, evidence-based strategy more effective than direct confrontation would have been? Please comment below with your thoughts on how ordinary citizens can help expose corruption in their own communities. If this story of justice and transformation inspired you, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that one determined person can truly change a broken system. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of the most remarkable civil rights victories in recent history, proving that justice, though sometimes delayed, can never truly be denied when we refuse to remain silent. Joseph Washington's journey teaches us that systemic injustice thrives in silence and darkness. True power comes not from authority, but from unwavering determination and methodical exposure of corruption. Age and appearance can become advantages when opponents underestimate you, allowing you to gather evidence while remaining invisible to those who see only stereotypes. Justice requires both patience and precision. The same skills that made Joseph valuable in intelligence work proved essential in dismantling corruption. The most effective response to discrimination isn't always loud confrontation, but rather the quiet, persistent documentation of patterns others dismiss as coincidence. When facing entrenched systems of oppression, remember that they depend on people's reluctance to believe institutions they trust could be fundamentally compromised. Joseph showed us that one person with commitment, strategic thinking, and moral clarity can trigger a cascade that transforms an entire justice system. Most importantly, his story reminds us that fighting for justice isn't just about punishing wrongdoers, but about healing communities and creating systems that truly protect everyone equally under the law. What powerful lessons have you taken from Joseph Washington's story? Have you ever witnessed or experienced racial discrimination in your community's institutions? Comment below with your thoughts on how ordinary citizens can document and expose systemic injustice. If this story of an underestimated elderly man bringing down corrupt racist officials inspired you, please hit that like button. Subscribe for more powerful stories of justice triumphing against all odds, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that positive change is possible even in the most broken systems. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of the most remarkable civil rights victories in recent history. Remember, in the fight against injustice, we are all agents of change.